nuevo día, a la primera actividad y creo que esta es una que muchos y muchas han estado esperando porque, por un lado, la temática tiene que ver con la dirección de arte en animación. Por favor. Y por otro lado, tenemos a un gran invitado que es un gran representante de esto, porque sé que ha dirigido arte en algunas de los largometrajes, proyectos de VR y también, por supuesto, series de televisión más queridas y favoritas de todos nosotros. Así que, por favor, quiero que Guadalajara y este foro de CCD le dé una gran bienvenida a Ian Worrel.
Is this working? Thumbs up? Cool, okay. Wow, there's quite a few people here. So, morning everyone. So my name is Ian Worrel. I was invited here today to talk to you all about art directing, specifically art directing in television animation. So that's what I've been doing for the past 12, 13 years. And so currently I work as a production designer. It's like an art director at Netflix. But before that, I was an art director at Disney Television Animation. And in that time, I got to work on 2 shows with a couple of my buddies. So Matt Brawley, who created Amphibia. And Alex Hirsch, who created Gravity Falls. So I'm assuming that you've seen these shows, correct? Is there anybody here who's seen every episode of both shows? This might be an upsetting fact, but that's 40 hours of stories. So all Gravity Falls and Amphibia added together is 40 hours produced in 10 years. That's like 25 feature films. So one feature director and their team, they might make 3 films in that exact amount of time. So the point is, in television, we tell a lot of story and we have to make a lot of art for this. It's very, very different. But it's also very exciting. There's a lot of opportunity with this format. There's always something new. We never get bored. Every week it's a new world, it's a new monster, something that will be creatively engaging and challenging and keep us engaged with the work. And yes, I did screenshot every single episode off of Disney Plus and line them up neatly on this slide. And by the way, just a quick note, I was only the art director on Amphibia for season 1 before some of my colleagues took over for me. So I've never been to this festival. Can I get a sense of who's all here? How many are animation students? Cool. Nice. Working animation professionals? Okay. Just straight up fans of animation. Nice. So I prepared a talk just walking through some of my thoughts about art direction for these 2 shows specifically, and then a few of the creative decisions that went into developing the styles for these shows, like the very, very nerdy specific stuff. Okay, so we'll start with my job as an art director on these shows. Like, what do I do? What the heck is an art director, my day-to-day? So here's me. Is this me in my crummy little office working on Gravity Falls art directing? More specifically, I was working on the main title at this time. This is about 10 years ago. So very simply, my job at the beginning of a project, I work with a small team, and we developed the style of a series. And after that moment, once we're in production, my main job is just being annoying. I spend all of my day bothering my artists. Sort of. It's all a good time, but that's what I do. I direct people. So I walk around all day and say, that line is too thick. Those colors are too bright. That was supposed to be scary. This was supposed to be daytime. Please paint at night. I go around and I am kind of a nag day to day. Very broad strokes, but like, of course, there's plenty of creative problem solving that I have to do. It's not just that. But a lot of my day is providing notes and feedback to my team and guiding them to make a show. So notes like this, I could not find any of my actual notes. These are Matt Brawley's notes on top of one of my drawings. It was an early version of the planner's house, and he was, wanted some different things. But this is the type of stuff that I would do with my designers every day, every 15 minutes. Another example, so I'm assuming everyone here is familiar with Gravity Falls enough. So at the beginning of season 2, we had a sequence where Dipper, he has to come clean and confess his crush to Wendy. It's a bittersweet moment, and it was a big moment at the beginning of our second season where we kind of wanted to end this false will they, won't they tension. And one of my painters turned in a painting that was supposed to It was supposed to capture the moment. They were supposed to just give a general vibe for this moment. But as the art director, I had different thoughts about this sequence. I thought that the tone, what we should be feeling, the audience, should be reflected in the art in a different way. How we should communicate that with the color and light. And so I did a notes pass, and it was my opinion that we should nudge it this way. It's a sad moment. There's some of that in there, like we are ending something. And so I did this, I sent them on their way, and that was my job. So that is what I did most of the time as the art director, is just kind of course correct, make sure people are going in the right direction. And here's some of those screen caps from that final sequence. So, most of my day. But that's not all of it. Occasionally I got to make some art from scratch, like the big stuff. I didn't just do little scribbles and notes for my artists. So these are some of my personal pieces that I created for the show. A lot of it is the main location, the establishing locations of the series. So let me flip through these. I'll talk over them. So I think that some art directors must have their own superpower. Like maybe they're a really strong character designer or a layout artist, a concept painter. Maybe it's what they did full-time before becoming a director. And so on these two shows, my main art contribution was designing the worlds that they lived in, the backgrounds that they went on top of. This was my superpower that I brought to the show personally. And then as the art director, I also have my eye on the final frame, what shows up on our televisions, the final the screenshot. So here's a couple screenshots, a few of them from the series. So, I make art, I give notes, but I also have my eye on this rectangle, everything that's in it. So all the moving parts, the background design, the background paint, the character design to some extent, the props, the effects, how all of that's colored, the composition, the layout, the character staging, most of it's being created by the team, but it has to pass through my hands at some point. And I have to have an opinion on all of it. Or not. Sometimes they nail it and I don't have to do anything. So even the smallest choices So the smallest choices, like anything in this composition, there needs to be a decision. Should it look hot down there? It's prehistoric. We're doing dinosaurs, it should be hot, right? I have to have an opinion. Cool. Okay, so this is something that surprised me about the job the most. Before I had done this job, I thought, well, if you're the art director, you're the art boss, you must do most of the drawing and painting, all the heavy lifting. Like I should shoulder that burden. So look at this slide. Every single one of these gray squares is a full design from one episode of Gravity Falls. So one character, one effect. One of those is just an entire background. And here's 2 episodes of Amphibia, 11 minutes each. Of all of this artwork, I make like 4 things from start to finish. Everything else, I give notes and I give opinions. So it's a ton of art. So every 6 to 8 weeks, we do this, all of this. And then we move on to the next episode. And when I say the 4 things that I make, like a full thing, start to finish. So, but don't get me wrong, as an art director, like I do draw and paint all day, but it is in the form of that feedback notes. So anyways, that's a quick overview of my day-to-day in production as an art director. I wanted to walk through how we arrived at the styles for these shows, primarily Gravity Falls, because I was very involved in that, but I will compare it to Amphibia so that we can compare the two. So starting with VizDev. So this was one of the first pieces of art that was created for the series by our character designer, Joe Pitt. We had big plans to do miniature sets for Gravity Falls from the very beginning. We were very excited about this, but it became clear instantly that we did not have the time or experience to attempt such an insane task. Could have been cool. Anyways, so I'll show some art from this time, VizDev. And so this is my favorite part working on a TV show. It's when I get to do the most art making. This is sketched by Alex Hirsch. So during this time, we're not necessarily Joe Pitt, his early Maple sketches. So we're not necessarily concerned about committing to anything. This is just playtime. If any of you know what Alex looks like, you'll recognize those 2 on the far right. Okay, so I dug this up on an old hard drive. No one has ever seen this. This is my one and only attempt at character design. It is not one of my superpowers. Anyways, some more sketches. These are some thumbnails exploring how we were going to approach things like the forest, just mood stuff, some Mystery Shack. This piece here was created to pitch the show. Alex pitched the show with this piece of art, among other things, way back in 20-something. Another sketch of the Mystery Shack by our designer, Sean Jimenez. Early sketch of the gift shop with our boy Seuss. Gideon's tent. There was a moment when we were bummed about not being able to do miniature sets, so we were like, well, we can do photography, photo collage. That's a close second, maybe. So jumping over to Amphibia, some early explorations of Sprig by our character designer, Joe Sparrow. So rad. Some incidentals. We did have Jamie or James Turner, the former art director at the Pokemon Company, do some sketches for us. One of my early takes on the swamp. From the very beginning, Sprig was going to be this color. That was decided, that was law. Matt Brawley's sketch of Wortwood. Here's another one, another take on Wortwood. This is one of my first pieces for Amphibia. We were considering a kind of storybook watercolor illustration, exploring ways to do that. Here's another slide trying to further push that idea of doing a watercolor look. That's my Anne. It's not that bad, but I didn't design it. Another take on the Planner's House, done by one of our designers, Janine Chang. Another one from James Turner. And then these next two are from a designer I hired. His name was Alexandre Desbois. He did some really cool takes on some of the earliest sketches of the world. And then the last bits of art that I had done on Amphibia before leaving, I did a little bit of viz dev for season 2, so I did these in my last week on the show. Some sketches of this wagon, and then the one and only piece I had done for Newtopia. Okay, so we can't stay in art playtime forever. At a certain point, we have to lock some things down. We have to come up with some decisions, clarify the style and the art direction before production begins. We have to commit. What are we doing? That was fun, but now we have to do it for real. So, what is our show going to look like from scratch? And this is kind of where it starts. So we'll start with character. I'm going to gloss over this a little bit. So character, like I mentioned, I don't really have an eye for character design. It is not one of my superpowers. And so me personally, I did not contribute to the character design process that much. But fortunately on these shows, we had the most incredible character artists, including Alex and Matt themselves, who are also excellent designers. And so in addition to running an entire series, they also kind of acted as the character art directors and owned the process. And it's because of this reason I can't really speak to design. I'm not that much of an expert, but both Alex and Matt are speaking this weekend. Maybe they'll fill in the gaps. So mainly I contributed creatively, by offering my 2 cents in reviews, possibly commenting on the mechanics related to how they would be animated or how they would emote with their expressions. Of course, their color and anything affecting how they would affect the final frame of the series. And this is interesting. The characters on both of these shows were designed primarily without the influence of the background art. We did them kind of on gray like this. On these shows, it was important to make sure that the designs of the main cast worked on their own, that they felt like the characters written in the scripts and had some of the vibe of our voice actors. They had to be entertaining. Our story artists needed to, enjoy drawing them, and they felt that they could get the performances that they needed out of their designs. So lots of priorities, really important ones to consider before designing a background. This has to work before we move on. So background art followed character design. It doesn't necessarily mean artists are working in a vacuum. We're all working together, being inspired by each other, of course. But we locked this down first. So character, that's established before anything else. So this is a little bit of a thought exercise that I did. I was looking at this, and I had thought, well, what if Alex had different idea for the look of the backgrounds, if that was his priority? And he wanted the world to look a certain way, and then we would figure out the characters. So let's say he wanted Gravity Falls to look like this. And so this is from a different show I grabbed, just to feel it out. He wants the Mystery Shack to look like this building. And here's what the characters look like on these backgrounds. Just to feel it out, the difference. And here's the other one. So in this case, character design would probably, well, it would definitely have to work within the limitations of this art style, which I don't think quite works. The combination is not, it's not clicking, and so the character designs would have to follow the background. There's just not enough of similar visual shape language. But of course, that's just one little piece of the equation. Whether or not the characters match, fine, that's one thing we should consider. But would this art style also be appropriate for the tone of the series, the stories that we're trying to tell? Could you imagine a truly scary scene with this art style? Does this feel like a place that our characters live in, or does it feel like art that they're on top of? So lots to consider. Anyways. Okay, so moving on. We've got our characters. We've got a bunch of viz dev that we've generated. You know, obviously we have a ton of reference for tone, art styles that were inspired by live action stills from other films, photography from where this show is set. It's a real place. So a small mountain town in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. So we want it to feel like this place, but we want it to be stylized in a way that our characters look like they belong here, and not stickers on top of a photograph. So we're going to take it one element at a time and get really detailed. I hope this is interesting, but this is the type of stuff that I think about all day. So starting with line, it's like one of the first decisions when it comes to background. Should we draw it or just paint it? Should we leave the line in or not? So early days of the pilot, and this was before my time, they did these backgrounds with no line. It was done by a studio called House of Cool in Toronto. And they work well enough. It's pretty successful. It's all good. So one of the reasons that we decided to go with line, and this is debatable, I think it's easier to communicate information quickly and clearly when we use line art. Like, we tell stories that are generally fast-paced, and we have to communicate information very clearly and quickly. So our show often had a lot of very specific storytelling clutter in the backgrounds, and illustrating all of that detail was generally faster and more successful. And one of the other reasons that we went with line, and maybe selfishly, I chose a style that I really like doing. So this is, here's some pages of my personal sketchbook. Like, this is my thing. Like, I like to draw with pen and ink. And so I'm going to be on a show for the next 3 or 4 years. I should choose something that I'm like into, right? Okay, so line, yes or no? Yes. So let's talk about what kind of line. And first we'll look at some artists that inspired us. First one being Jeff Smith's Bone, the comic. And Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes. So these lines are perfect. This is masterclass. And this was a good jumping off point because the characters, they already kind of worked with this style of line. It's a poor composition, but it's there. You were in the ballpark. And these illustrators also had really great solutions for organizing complex visual ideas like forests. How do you draw that? Okay, so line. We went with, like this, a brush pen with thicks, thins, it tapered, it was done quickly, a bold gestural line. And here's a simple style guide showing some of that. Thicks in the foreground, thins in the background, not an even line, how to handle pen weight, use it to your advantage, versus Amphibia, which is the exact opposite of Gravity Falls. So these lines are super thin, just 2 pixels, and there's no tapering, and versus it is mechanical, it's occluded, and it's drawn very slow and scratchy. And Gravity Falls is quick, bold, gestural. Here's a couple more that I pulled. And that kind of stuff is a little bit, it's more preference than anything. There's a lot of right answers for how to do this. We just picked the one that we enjoy doing the most at the moment. And here's the 2 side by side to compare the 2 shows. Okay, so how am I doing on time? 10:30. Okay, so we'll talk about background design now that we have our line dialed in. Just briefly touch on this. It's a little bit abstract to talk about. So I pulled a bunch of different images with different art styles to first compare how these characters look like on different environments. So this is a Gravity Falls background. Here's one from Steven Universe. And some of the big obvious differences is they skew more realistic with their proportions and perspective. There's areas of higher concentration of high density detail. Here's I don't know where this is from, but this is like a classic cartoony background with all those wonky flat shapes. And you can feel the difference instantly. The way we draw anything, whether it's this fire hydrant, matters. And here's one from Amphibia, just to feel it. In Amphibia, everything was kind of inflated like a balloon, every object, and perspective was always ignored. It got in the way of appeal and clarity, so we just omitted it. This one is just another image with highly graphic and stylized, this kind of repeating, almost textile pattern. Another forest where it skews more realistic, not really, but it's on its way there compared to the previous version. One with very realistic proportions, using blacks heavily, and then the Gravity Falls forest. So it's hard to talk about why I think this works better, and there's a lot to consider. You know, Dipper and Mabel, they have chunky, bold, appealing shapes. Their detail, all of the little details is spread out kind of evenly. It doesn't bunch up in places. They're drawn volumetric and 3-dimensional where it counts, and then 2D where that's helpful, where appeal and clarity are a priority. And so that's all being considered when we design a background. All of the littlest things, they kind of add up. And this is a very little thing. So even these little tufts of hair, these little loop-de-loop things, that was intentionally incorporated into the Gravity Falls background, especially in the vegetation. So when you look at this, those little hair lumps are everywhere. So when even a blade of grass, we have to make a choice. Should it be a sharp thing? Well, what if we tied the visual language of the characters into the environments? And they look good in this world, and obviously it's a fully rendered image and there's lots going on here, but even those little things like the hair, that can matter, that adds up. All right, I'm gonna do a quick tangent to one specific background design problem because it was a pet project of mine. So the forest, figuring out how to draw this mess was my obsession. How do you put an outline around this chaos? As an exercise, I would encourage anyone to try and do that, just for fun or for frustration. So this was from day one. Oh, they're in Gravity Falls. It's a forest. We're going to use line. Great. Okay, now what? So I gathered up in a quick look at the evolution of the forest on this series, just to take a glance. So we saw the pilot, and early days when I had just started, I didn't have any ideas about what to do. So this is all mostly aimless. These are shapes and lines and colors without direction or intention. Once we got into thinking about it more carefully, when we decided, well, we're going to do line, here's what the character likes. This was the very first attempt before we started season 1 at a forest. In the middle of season 1, I was like, no, this is not working. Let's do a totally different attempt. And so in season 1 and 2, for those who really pay attention, you'll notice that the forest never looked the same. So in season 2, I threw everything out. We went on a road trip, we visited the redwoods, we're like, this is all wrong, what are we doing here? And I did it from scratch. No, now our forests look like this. This is how we're gonna do it. And then in the very last episode of the last sequence of the series, I directed my designers to try new solutions for how to draw and paint our forests. Anyways, thank you for putting up with that little explanation, but I wanted to share because it's my little pet project. And I'm sure if we did a season 3, I would throw it all out. Okay, we're gonna do the forest right. Uh-oh. All right, okay. We're doing it one element at a time, so hang with me. We're gonna do color now. So this is pretty straightforward, actually. There's not some big theory about color. So choosing objects in the background was pretty straightforward. Gravity Falls was supposed to feel like a believable place, and so color choices were somewhat literal, not realistic, but what you would expect. So here are the local colors. There's the color of the object, absence of light and ouch. Am I still good? Good? Okay. So just a quick comparison. I wanted to walk through what it would have looked like to choose a different sort of baseline color palette, and then I'll talk about a little bit of the theory about why we did this. It's a small note, but I wanted to cover everything. So had it been more saturated, and choosing the color. So we're keeping our eye on how these choices affect the characters. Color, saturation, and value can easily overtake an image. And we want to be mindful that the background remains in the background. It is secondary to the characters. So here's one that we could have gone muted, we could have gone monochromatic-ish. And here's the local colors of our forest. Very much like that photograph, we picked the color that it is. We could have gone with a non-literal kind of like, well, it's a cartoon, let's do something crazy. And there's a reason that we didn't do this. I'll cover that in a minute. Dark, high contrast, which is problematic for the characters. They become lost instantly. Am I still working? No? Audio? There you go. All right. Okay, so just a quick note on Gravity Falls about color choices. It was our intention to maintain a baseline warm color palette for the series. So it's summertime, redwoods, old log cabins, like warm was a choice, at least for like when we're home, when we're at the Mystery Shack, when we're at town, baseline warmth. Versus Amphibia, which was intentionally blues and greens. Some of this was me, okay, I'm art directing 2 shows, I need to like push them apart, not get like stuck in one place. But mostly this is, you know, it's a cool place, frogs, a wet place. Let's just go with blues and greens. So Amphibia versus Gravity Falls, warm. Amphibia, cool. That was intentional. And then same thing with Amphibia as well. Local color choices, what you would expect. Grass is green, not very complicated. And so the reason for that is stories, they have a natural arc from we start our story, things are chill, maybe a little boring, and then they ramp up. Same thing with color. We start at a place that's chill. We make simple choices. It allows us room to make a really bold choice later when the story calls for it. So that's simply it. That's the idea behind it. All right, so I will touch on shading and lighting real quick. I might be melting your brains at this point, but we're going to do it, all of it. So I'll touch on technique real fast. When it comes to shading, so light and shadow, same thing, same idea as color. We place light and shadow where you'd expect it to be. There's light over here, so shadow is going to be on this side. There's light up there, so this thing will have a rim light. Very straightforward. Versus some shows will make arbitrary, stylized decisions, shapes, light and shadow shapes will cross the room in a non-literal way. We were very straightforward. And the thing, Gravity Falls, every single shape is a hard edge. There's no gradients, and that was a choice. Versus Amphibia, everything is shaded with soft gradients. So when you compare the two, you know, Gravity Falls is kind of sharp and pointy, whereas Amphibia was smoother and more gentle. And this was intentional. And this kind of thing just boils down to preference. Plenty of ways we could have handled this. We just picked a lane and we went with it. Okay, so lighting, last thing, and the big one. So lighting played a pretty huge role on these shows, obviously. Here are some moments from Gravity Falls that had some pretty big feelings. And so background lighting can really affect the tone of a scene, and we want to make sure it's serving the story that we're telling. So, you know, this show had it all: emotional moments and sweet, scary, tense sequences, scenes that were just supposed to be kind of pretty, and of course, plenty of action and comedy. Same with Amphibia, there was lots of range, and we used lighting to support that. So, lighting that was even, basic, tell some jokes, same location for when things got intense, zombies attack. And same thing with time of day. We had daytime, nighttime, cozy fire time, zombie time. And then I also have for Gravity Falls. Daytime, nighttime, rainy times, and end times. Okay, so that's a very brief overview of some of the art direction for these two shows. Obviously, I could keep going. There's lots and lots to talk about, but we only have an hour. And so I'll wrap this next part with just a few more of my favorite Amphibia backgrounds that the team did. And these are all cool because the lighting, just the lighting, tells a very different story for each piece. So there's a lot of detail and nuance with this stuff, and there's a reason for that. and it's what surprised me the most when I started doing this job. Art directing is communicating. You know, I break down styles and all of this mind-numbing detail so that I can talk about it very clearly, that I can pick it apart and articulate exactly how to achieve a style, and effectively direct another artist. Excuse me. So I talked about art direction, the style, but my job, what I spend most of my day doing while I work on these shows, is art directing. So there's direction, the creative part, and then there's directing, the people part. That's the job. So leading a team, instructing, encouraging, sometimes being demanding, and then other times gently coaxing a dozen very different personalities to all work in sync and in the same style. Help them stay motivated and inspired, and if I'm lucky, not hate my guts by the time that we're done. Okay, let me get to this next few parts. I wanted to show some goodies for joining me today, because we were going to get to Q&A. Sorry to blast through this. So, I try to stay busy, trying to learn new things, trying to come up with new styles, and I wanted to share some of my recent experiments and things that I'm doing today. So you remember the miniature set thing that we were doing for Gravity Falls? I can't let that go, and so in my free time I've been doing some additional experiments with building miniature sets and illustrating on top of them, hunting new styles. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. Like, I get restless in my work and I want to stay inspired. This is another thing that I built with one of my friends. I did fabrication with him on storybots, doing illustrations with the miniature photography. 3D is another big one that I've been doing recently. So this is the Amphibia kitchen in a kind of like hand-painted game art style. Also, I gave up on drawing. I do all of my designing in the virtual reality now. That's not actually true. Don't stop drawing. And here's one of my recent experiments doing VR and Blender and illustration and mapping it onto stuff and doing crazy camera moves. So this has always been a question from the day one, like, why does CG have to look like it always looks? Like, why can't we draw the way we like to draw and have it be a CG thing? That question comes up all the time. I'm obsessed with that question, and I'm determined to figure it out. And then the last piece that I just finished a few months ago. So this was done in VR, the Gravity Falls Mystery Shack. This is one of the reasons I decided to pursue 3D in the first place. I really, really wanted to make a 3D diorama of the Mystery Shack. That was like, I just wanted to figure it out. So here's the final illustration that I had completed. And here it is moving. Do it, everyone. This is my talk. Thank you, thank you. I need to take a quick picture for my daughter. She doesn't believe me that I'm doing this. There. She's going to be so wrong. Yes.
Just one?
Yeah. She's very enthusiastic. We do question? Yeah.
Hi. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Aranza. Nice to meet you.
You too.
My question is, how did you start? What was your first job until you get to art director?
Until I got to
Where
art-
do you start?
Yeah, so I worked at a studio called Jib Jab right out of school, and I had a lot of experience. So I turned down Pixar to go to this studio because this studio, like TV, we switched projects every day. Every week we were like, oh, we're going to do stop motion now. Oh, we're going to do 2D animation now. Oh, we're going to try 3D. And I got a lot of experience doing lots of things. I had a lot of time to fail early. And then, honestly, I probably shouldn't have art directed Gravity Falls from the very beginning because I did not have experience. I had done some visual development. I worked with Alex a little bit on the pilot. And then he said, do you want to art direct? And I was like, what does that mean? And it was a very, very steep learning curve. And so it was trial by fire. But for me personally, the way I learn, I needed to do a lot of things quickly. Had I gone to Pixar, I probably would have been on one show for maybe a year. And that would have been my experience. And I think it would have been bad for me personally. Do we have time for more questions? You've kept your hand for.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Vianney, and I'm sorry for my bad English.
It's okay, I'm sorry for having no Spanish.
How do you know when the back rooms is stealing the limelight from the scene beyond the colors?
How did I know that they were lifelike? What do you mean? Sorry. Sorry.
Yes, from the protagonist and the back rooms. When the back rooms is stealing from the limelight, the protagonist. From the protagonist.
Stealing protagonist from the main characters.
And how do you know that the background is stealing protagonist from the main protagonist that are the main characters?
Say that, sorry, one more time. How do I know that the characters, sorry.
How do you know?
How do I know?
If the background isn't stealing focus from the characters.
Oh, stealing? Focus, right. So there's some science to that and there's some art. So a lot of it is just feeling it. So if I look away from the image and then I look at it real quick, if the characters pop out at me, it's a quick, easy test. That's pure instinct. There's some things, I didn't talk about this because it's really nerdy. There is the value range from black to white. The characters have black and white and everything in between. The backgrounds intentionally are limited to the middle grays. We don't go to pure black, we don't go to pure white. That's another attempt to keep the characters above the background. So it's a little bit of science, a little bit of instinct, just feeling it out. And color styling, so coloring the characters is also critical. We're not just coloring the backgrounds and we're stuck with the characters. We have lots of control over how the characters are colored and lit. Composition is another big one. So focal point, where our eyes are looking. How do we compose an image? So lots to consider for sure.
One in the back?
Yeah. One in the back. One in the back. I see you with the blue mask, red hat. Yep.
All right. First of all, my English is not the best, but I will try.
Second, how do you, at what age did you start to be interested in to be a designer, but as a career? And what inspired you to do that?
I mean, this was my thing from the very beginning. I was the art kid in school, second grade, third grade, like, this is who I am. I made an intentional decision to pursue it as a career about the same time that we're all in high school and we're taking tests and touring colleges, and I was like, there's nothing that I know how to do better than this, and this is what I enjoy, so I'm going to do this for reals, and I'm going to try really hard at it until I'm successful, because there was a lot at stake. So, I see you. Question? Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
As an art director, what do you consider that is like the most important part of a production, like the central piece?
The most important part of art directing?
Yes.
I think it's what I closed with. It's the people part. And this is a weird one. Like maybe like a lot of you artists, like you're most successful just hanging out in your little workspace doing your thing, but I have 15 people, sometimes as many as 20 people that need my like attention and care and help, and I have to figure out a way to communicate it. And I have all different personality types. Like I didn't know, I don't know, like I have to be a leader of people. There's the art, but like, you know, I have to get people excited about this stuff to create, and it's really strange. So that's the most important part, and that's the most challenging part for me. I think I have 5 minutes. There's a whole group
Here,
raising their hands.
Bueno.
This is
Bueno. Aquí.
last question. Oh,
Here, hello. I wanna ask something. If you're gonna do crossover between Gravity Falls, Amphibia, and for example, the old house, you have to mix the art styles of the three backgrounds.
do I have to mix them?
Yeah, how? Because you say it's different, the backgrounds and the line from Gravity Falls and Amphibia. So if you're gonna do a crossover, hypothetically, how do? You mix the art styles?
Not intentionally, but I have a style that's baked into my hand that I have difficulty getting out. My signature way of doing things is on my art, whether I like it or not, but I did not intentionally mix styles together. But those two shows, the characters and the tone, the style of comedy also, they shared a lot of similarities. So like, there was no reason to reinvent it from scratch. So moving to Amphibia, there was a lot of things that we took right from Gravity Falls. But creatively, it was never like, we always treated Amphibia as its own thing. And started and worked backwards from the characters and the stories. It wasn't like, I like that Gravity Falls thing, let's just put it in the show because I'm excited about it. That never happened. I have time for one more question, and this, very enthusiastic. One more? Okay. I mean, I can hang out, but.
No, one more.
Yeah, he's sorry to make you walk.
Hi, Ian. The kid with the face here. My question is, what is the most difficult thing you had to do as an art director with all of your 15 team? What was the most difficult thing you had to do in your last project? For example, Amphibia.
Amphibia went very smoothly. We learned a lot of hard lessons and got that all out of the way on Gravity Falls. The most difficult, there's a lot of difficulty. I think because of how much we have to create and how many people I have to manage, like we have to give up on a lot of our priorities. Like, I really want this sequence to look amazing, but I don't have time. We are out of time, or this artist has gotten 2, 3, 4 rounds of notes. I'm at risk of like really hurting that dynamic, and I'm just gonna lay off. I think, yeah, a lot of the difficulty was just like we care about this stuff. I care about this stuff a lot. I had to let go of many things. That's very difficult for me to do. And the cost to do that is to stay up all night, that hurts my family, and I can't coach my daughter's soccer team. So the balance is always the hard part. We have to do a lot. I think that's right. So it is now 11 o'clock. I think I'm out of time, yeah? Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I hope you had a great time. We have a lot of good talks coming up. Y este mensaje es muy importante. Uno, recuerden que para la salida pueden usar la puerta trasera, que es un poco más grande. Dos, en este momento,